Hi, my name is Carl Woolf. I'm a solicitor advocate with a firm of solicitors called Noble Solicitors, based in Northampton, Luton, the Old Bailey, Stevenage, and anywhere else that happens to be criminals lurking around. I've always been a solicitor. I'm a solicitor advocate now. I started off doing mixed training contract, family, crime, civil, and conveyancing, and ended up doing criminal work because everything else was too boring. And I just practice in crime now.
Thank you so much. Andrew, do you mind going next?
No, not at all. Evening, everybody. My name's Andrew Simpson. I'm a solicitor. I've been in practice for 20 years. I use a lot of felt tips just to keep, hopefully you can't see the grace coming through there. I started in a high street firm. I did my training contract there. I did family law. I did conveyance and wills, probate, everything that you would tend to get in a high street firm. I now tend to concentrate most of my time on commercial property for no apparent reason, just that's where the gap was at the firm, and I've ended up doing that for over 15 years now. Quite enjoy it, to be honest, strangely, although crime is interesting. You get better stories with crime than you do with property. I also teach part-time at Northumbria University, and as you've probably seen by Gabby's kind words on my intro there, I have been appointed this year a Deputy District Judge and a fee-paid tribunal judge in the Social Entitlement Chamber, although I haven't sat yet because of COVID-19, so it's appointment in, appointment name only. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And last but by no means least, Siobhan.
Sorry, nearly forgot to unmute then. I'm Siobhan. I'm a trainee solicitor with the Crown Prosecution Service. Prior to that, I worked as a paralegal in the regulatory department at Shoesmiths. And prior to entering law at all, I was a funeral arranger for quite a long time. So it's a complete career change for me. I always wanted to do criminal law, as that's really where my interest at my heart was always, to be honest. So yeah, that explains me, I think.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, we've got a great panel, and thank you again for joining us this evening. So Lydia, if you don't mind starting and discussing more information about why you wanted to be a barrister and why you think the people that have joined us this evening should go and do that.
Okay, well, I wanted to be a barrister primarily because I am, I suspect, deeply unemployable for any length of time somewhere that's non-unionised. Prior to joining the police, I couldn't really hold down a job for much more than about 6 months because I was far too much of a gobby bugger. Whereas at the police, they can't fire you, which is quite useful. And as a self-employed person, once you get in and once you get past the tenancy point, it's also quite difficult to get rid of you. But actually, it turns out I'm quite good at the job, and being gobby helps. As a barrister, I would say it's a vast amount of fun. In a mixed practice, which I know Callum is similar, you get to try and do a lot of different things, try out different areas of law. And even within a single practice, you can try lots of different things. So even if you went into, say, family law, there's public law, there's private law, there's finances. There's a really good range of things that you can get your teeth into. I can control my own diary and control my own life around that, which I really enjoy. It's extremely challenging. In the first couple of years, I think it's more difficult to control your diary. You're pretty much at the behest of your clerks. But as time goes on, I mean, right now, whenever I want to, I can just book a day out, book a week out. As long as I'm not returning vast amounts of work, nobody's going to cause any problems with that. But it's also quite high octane, and I don't think this is exclusive to the barrister side of things. I think it's certainly in criminal law, it's exactly the same for the solicitors. Today I had a contested hearing in a family case that went from 9 o'clock in the morning till 1. I was then meant to have an advocates meeting at 4:30 in the afternoon, but at 2, my clerk sent out a desperate message saying, can anyone get to Bradford Crown Court? There's a warrant with no representation and Judge Rose needs somebody there right now. So I just thought, right, yeah, great, jumped in the car, off I went. All of a sudden I'm in the cells an hour later. So I really like that. the excitement of that. There's not many other jobs where you'd be able to do that. But similarly so, for everyone else on that email chain, they were quite free to go, nah, don't fancy it, I'm gonna stay at home. When it comes to the difference between barrister and solicitor, I think it's very difficult to assess, because certainly before I became a barrister, I didn't really know much of the difference. And now that I am a barrister, I am amazed and largely clueless as to what solicitors do, apart from assist me greatly. I mean, I couldn't give you a huge amount of difference, especially like now when you've got rights of audience as a solicitor. In the criminal side of things, you could be appearing, I do cases against solicitors and solicitor advocates absolutely all the time. I would say maybe the benefit of being a barrister is that you don't have to deal with the clients all the time. I really enjoy my clients. I really like the time I get to spend with them, but I really like that they don't have my phone number, so they can't call me at all times of the night when their kids are kicking off or they've been arrested or whatever else it is. So having that slight bit of distance, I really, really like. And also as a barrister, a lot of the time the buck stops with you, as in once you get to court, if you are taking instructions from a solicitor, it's you that's going to be there dealing with it. And I find that quite interesting. I like that I get to do all the flouncy advocacy side of things and a bit of the dramatic and a bit of the hand holding as well, but not the back office side of things, which is vital, but I don't think I'd be quite so good at. So I'll hand you back over to Gabby.
Thank you. Amalia, do you want to go?
Thank you. Should we now have a look at the employed side of the bar as well, Mr. Gerard?
Yes, forgive me, I might go on a little bit longer than Lydia. That's probably one of my problems. But yes, to give you my background, I was one of those sad people who knew from the age of 11 that I wanted to go into the law. And that was informed by two things: a strong sense of justice, of what's right and what's wrong, and what's fair and what's not. And also two pieces of popular culture. The older ones amongst us may remember a programme called Crown Court, which used to air on lunchtimes. It has the feel of a very different age if you watch it these days, but it was influential on me, as was another reference in popular culture, and that was the lawyer Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. And anybody who hasn't read To Kill a Mockingbird, read it. That was very influential, the model lawyer. And a very important novel, particularly considering some of the events around us today. So aged 18, I stumbled sleepily from the lakeland town of Keswick, where I lived, into the bright lights of Manchester in the late 1980s, where it was all bucket hats, great music and northern grit. And I went off to do a law degree at what was then Manchester Polytechnic. I took 4 years over that rather than 3 because I failed my second year, and primarily failing, highly embarrassingly, criminal law. I resat the year, got through the law degree, went off to the College of Law in York, and did the legal practice course there. I, at that point, went down the path of becoming a solicitor rather than a barrister because, firstly, I didn't think I was good enough to be a barrister. And secondly, I just seemed to gravitate down that path. I did a training contract in a high street firm in West Cumbria, and I did all sorts of work within that training contract. I qualified as a solicitor in 1997, and I joined a high street firm doing all sorts of work, but mainly family work. I continued to do that until the moment of revelation came, when I was on a family law course and there was role-playing involved, and I cross-examined somebody to the point of tears, and I was told by the tutor who took me aside afterwards, perhaps you might like to consider your advocacy in a different arena. And I think it was then that I realised that perhaps the criminal law was more what I wanted to do. So I joined the CPS in 2003 and worked through the ranks, being a Crown prosecutor, senior Crown prosecutor, and then a Crown advocate. And I got my higher rights qualifications through the CPS by sitting the 2-part course. I've been a full-time Crown advocate in the CPS since 2008, so 12 years now. I've been in the CPS for 17. In terms of transferring to the bar, why did I do that? I often get asked that question. I do not do anything different now as an employed barrister with the CPS than I did as a solicitor advocate. And you only have to look at the likes of people like Carl, who are here tonight on the panel, the wealth of experience that he has, to show that there is very little difference. So don't get too hung up on the idea whether you want to be a solicitor advocate or a barrister. I think that's the advice I would offer. But in terms of employed bar versus self-employed bar, well, obviously it's not a competition. It depends on the type of person you are. Personally, for me, I enjoy being an employed barrister with the CPS because it suits me. The key advantage is, I would say, the financial stability of being salaried, the ready supply of work. You don't have to fight for work in the CPS. It's there and you get it. It's a large organisation. It has the appropriate level of resources. The personal benefits, well, quite numerous. Flexi time, annual leave, paid annual leave, sick pay, maternity pay if that applies to you, flexible working patterns. And me personally, one of the great advantages of working for the employed bar is that I don't have to travel. I practice exclusively in Carlisle Crown Court, and I'm very lucky to do that. That is partly because the CPS is an organisation which respects people's differences, and I have reasonable adjustments because I have particular issues around the issue of travel itself. So therefore it is a reasonable adjustment I have. So I only ever work in Carlisle, so that suits me very, very much indeed. There is also a clear career progression structure within the CPS, and of course a pension scheme. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say there are advantages and disadvantages between employed bar and self-employed bar. There are only differences, because some of the issues, I think Lydia touched on this already, is that you are your own boss when you are at the self-employed bar. Nobody breathing down your neck, no line manager overloading you with work. And also, you are independent. The Crown Prosecution Service is a political creature. It has certain policies, etc. And I think a couple of other points, the flexibility. If you go into the self-employed bar, you could prosecute or defend, whereas I've only ever prosecuted, having done some defence work when I was a solicitor. And finally, the earning potential. I am salaried as a Crown Advocate in the Crown Prosecution Service, and that suits me. I am, I would say, well paid when compared to equivalent solicitors in private practice, but I perhaps don't have the unlimited earning potential that somebody in the self-employed bar who is prepared and who is able to travel does. So that's perhaps a consideration. Looking at looking at the Crown Prosecution Service, those who've seen The Life of Brian remember there was a comment, what did the Romans ever do for us? Well, what did the CPS ever do for me? Well, quite a few things, I would say. I've already mentioned the career progression. There's a clear structure there. It's interesting work, it's challenging, it's very varied. No two cases are the same. And it is all about the people. You get the chance to do justice for individuals, and you get to meet those individuals, victims, witnesses, relatives, as well, of course, as defendants and your other co-workers and colleagues in the criminal justice system. It's incredibly rewarding. I'll give just one brief example. I dealt with a case involving a man whose 20-year-old son, had been the victim of a single punch. He fell on concrete and he suffered long-lasting, life-altering brain injuries. I dealt with that case from beginning to end, including the father, who came to attack me across the room because he was so frustrated by the process. But I talked him round. And I made him a promise that I would see that case from beginning to end. And I went to the Court of Appeal when the defendant appealed his sentence. The CPS gives you an opportunity to do that as a Crown advocate, and with the higher rights as a solicitor advocate, and then ultimately as a barrister, I was able to see that case through from cradle to grave. It's hard work. It can be exhausting. There can be heavy caseloads, but it's worth it, I would say. There's nothing more important to me than achieving justice for somebody, representing somebody's interests who has trouble speaking up for themselves, prosecuting people who've perhaps behaved appallingly to others because of aspects of their personalities, colour, sexuality, etc. It is immensely satisfying to stand up for that victim and to prosecute people who have transgressed. But at the same time, the byword is, as ever, justice and fairness. It's important to remain fair. But overall, the Crown Prosecution Service, my 17 years there, has given me a good career, and one which I wouldn't hesitate to recommend.
Thank you so much for that. Callum, would you like to go next? So Callum's our pupil barrister on the panel.
Yes, I can go next, Gabby. Thank you. I'll keep it short and sweet because I think everything that Lydia and Gerard have already said covers most of the things I wanted to say to you. On a side note, can I just apologise if any of you hear singing in the background? My next door neighbours are Liverpool fans, and they've been quite excited since Wednesday last week when Liverpool won the league. So they're currently in the back garden singing. So I'm hoping it's not going to get picked up on my microphone. In terms of the reasons I chose the bar, I think, like Lydia, my teachers would probably have agreed and said that I was a gobby little bugger as well. I was quite argumentative. I didn't do so well at GCSEs, but I came through on my A-levels and ended up stumbling into university rather naively to study law. I had a real enjoyment of language and using words. I always enjoyed doing things like public speaking, championing others' interests, especially if I thought they were being unfairly treated. And that all lended its hand quite well to an enjoyment of advocacy, mooting at university, negotiation competitions, things like that. So for me, that was the first tick that lent its hand to a career at the bar. And that might be something that you all want to consider as to whether you really enjoy speaking to people and dealing with people. Not that solicitors don't, because in echoing Gerard and Lydia, I think the careers now are more similar than they've ever been. And you'll hear from Carl, who obviously has his rights of audience and is far, far more experienced than I am on that point as well. So I think Gerard's right in terms of starting out at the point you all are. And it's good to have a goal, whether you want to be a barrister or a solicitor as your end goal. But I think don't dwell too much on that perhaps at the moment, and think really about the fact that you want to have a legal career and how you're going to springboard yourself into that first and foremost. I think that's the key here. In terms of the bar, again, for me, my parents have always been self-employed, so that lent its hand to me wanting to be self-employed. I'm quite well motivated and an independent worker, so not having a boss, as it were, suits me. It may not suit you, so definitely think about that as well. I can't really comment on finances. I think Gerard and Lydia have done that quite well already, but I obviously haven't reached a point where I'm earning myself per se, so I'll skip over that point. I think some other considerations for you all to think about now, the camaraderie at the bar from what I've seen and what I had seen previously on mini pupilages is immense. The conversations you will hear in the robing rooms, the advocates' rooms around Crown Courts across the country, it is great. And those are conversations which I thoroughly enjoyed. Always some banter being thrown around as well, which I liked. And I think most importantly, there was always someone there who I could ask a question to, no matter how stupid it may seem. There will always be someone who's willing to lend a hand. It doesn't matter if they're from a different chambers. It doesn't matter if they're from a different circuit. There will always be someone there happy to help you. And that to me really stood out. In terms of perhaps meritocracy as well, and I think both Lydia and Gerard have already touched on this, with regard to earnings and the way the bar works, it is a reputation-based system. And so being good at your job and garnering a reputation of being a reliable and a capable advocate will obviously help you earn money when you're a self-employed barrister. So that again may be something that attracts you, being judged on your reputation and your ability to get a result. And you might want to think about that as well in possibly deciding between these two professions. Every day being different is another thing that I like about this. I'm 3 months in now. I've been doing 50% crime and 50% family, and I've found no 2 days are the same. Today I was in doing a finding of fact on a hybrid hearing, which has been quite interesting, especially in trying to deal with all the technology issues that arise in having certain people on Microsoft Teams and certain people in the courtroom. And previously we've been doing the same in crime. So I've been finding that every day in every single case is completely different, and that lends its hand really to keeping me interested in everything. I always knew that I wasn't the type of person, and I did try in previous jobs, but I wasn't the type of person to be able to sit behind a desk and deal with the same paperwork each day. I really struggle with that, and I find I get bored very quickly. Much like Lydia, I could never settle down in a job for more than 6 months, really. So that then lent its hand to doing this. And I think lastly, and possibly most importantly, if you are a people person, then a career in law, especially in an area such as crime and family, is definitely a career for you. You have to have a lot of different hats. I've seen my pupil supervisor especially not only have to be a good advocate over the last 3 months, but also make sure that she's able to be a counsellor outside of court, someone who can advise on things that aren't just legal, most importantly of all, someone that can be trusted to get the job done. So if you enjoy dealing with people, then definitely consider this a career for you, I would say.
Thank you so much, Callum. That was really, really helpful. Should we now switch to the other side and ask our solicitor advocate to take the stand? Carl?
Okay, thanks, Amelia. So I didn't know I wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger. I wanted to be, as far as I can remember, a ninja or a spy. I think they were the two things. And when I got a little bit older, I then decided actually I wanted to be a physio, but I was rubbish at biology. So it didn't really leave me with very many career options, I didn't think. My parents being quite traditional and my careers teacher being quite traditional, I went to an all-boys grammar school, albeit I was the first in my generation to go to university. I was told, really, you've got to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. Well, as I said, I was rubbish at biology. I can't add up 2 and 2. Well, I can just about add up 2 and 2, so I was never going to be an accountant. So law it was. So I applied for a law degree, and I got in. And I didn't really know what it was all about. I was working my way through university as a doorman. I worked as a bodyguard for a while, and as a martial arts instructor. And I'd come into contact with various people through those jobs, the police, other lawyers. And most of the time, the people that I came into contact with said, well, being a solicitor is probably better than being a barrister. I'd seen a bit like Gerard, Crown Court. I'd seen there used to be a program called LA Law, where everybody was very glamorous and worked and lived in LA and drove fast cars. And I thought, actually, that sounded quite good. And as I went through my law degree, I still didn't really know much about being a barrister. I knew more about being a solicitor, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't really enjoy my law degree. I found a lot of it was boring, and I couldn't really get my head around a lot of it. There were a few things that interested me, but one thing I loved, which was mooting. That was something which I took part in. I won my university mooting championship. And everyone said, well, look, maybe you should go to the bar, do something to do with advocacy. And when I started to look, I realised that actually the choice for me was quite a simple one. Could I afford to be a barrister? I qualified, well, in fact, I started my training contract in 1993, probably before a lot of people here might have been born. And there were no scholarships, there were no there was no help to go to the bar. And so it was either be self-employed and hope that my family would support me, or it was become a solicitor. And that's the reason why I decided to become a solicitor, because I simply couldn't afford to be a barrister. And so I went, did my, as it was, solicitors finals then, now the LPC. And again, there were a few different subjects that I enjoyed, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I eventually found a training contract in a high street firm in North London. And in my first 3 seats, because you had to do 4 different seats at that stage, some contentious and some non-contentious, I did civil litigation, I did conveyancing, and I did family. And I hated every single one of them. I didn't like conveyancing. Sorry, Andrew. I fell asleep almost the first day I started. I should have known I didn't like conveyancing because I failed land law when I did my degree and had to resit that over the summer. So I knew I wasn't going to like that. Family, I didn't enjoy family law. Not that I didn't like the advocacy side of it. That seemed interesting. But I didn't like people squabbling about which records and, you know, which books they were going to keep more than which kids they were going to keep. And so I didn't enjoy that. And civil litigation just seemed like a game of who could shout the loudest. And I remember I started a civil litigation case my very first day of my training contract. And by the time I finished my training contract, the case was still ongoing. And I thought, well, I realised that I had a very short attention span and I couldn't be dealing with cases like that. And in fact, I remember as I was coming to the end of my 3rd seat, which was family, I realised that I hated every single aspect of the law. And I remember ringing my mum and basically saying to her, I have wasted my time because I don't want to be a lawyer. And as mums do, she said, look, stick it out, you know, become qualified because you never know, you can always do something else, but stick it out. And in fact, my last 6 months, I did criminal law. And in that time, I dealt with somebody who had abused his children. I dealt with a mortgage fraud and I dealt with a murder. And I went into court and I absolutely loved it. I thought, this is where the buzz is. This is what I'd sort of seen on TV. These were the stories that were in the newspaper. And that's, I think, was probably my saving grace. If I hadn't have done that, I probably wouldn't be a lawyer today. So I qualified and the firm, for some reason, offered me a position in their civil litigation department. And I took a very big step and I decided that I wasn't going to do that. And so I left having qualified without a job, something that I've realised now you should probably never do. And I wrote to a number of different law firms, and I offered my services, and a firm in Kilburn, a very well-known criminal firm called Powell Spencer, were recruiting for a nighttime police station advisor, which all sounded very exciting until I actually started the work. And I realised that it meant from 5:30 at night until 9 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week, I had to cover their police stations in the area. And I was absolutely knackered. I rode around on a motorbike. That's the only way I could afford it. And when I turned up at the police station in my leather jacket and my biker's helmet, the officers always asked if I was there to sign the bail book, because they thought I was a defendant. But in fact, I really loved that whole aspect. And I discovered, although I knew it anyway from my mooting, that I liked the sound of my own voice. I liked to argue with police officers. I liked to defend people who had perhaps been, I thought, at various times wrongly arrested. And that to me was exciting. And I think perhaps it may have been Gerard who said, or it may have been Andrew, I certainly had the best stories work-wise out of any of my friends. And I did that for about 18 months. And during the course of that, I met other solicitors at the police station, and I was offered a job as a freelance advocate. And I started doing small bits in the court. And I remember my very first trial being sent along to a trial in Camberwell Youth Court, which was a trial for a robbery for a youth. I didn't really know what I was doing. I hadn't had proper training. Why they sent me along, I don't know. And my client got convicted. And I was absolutely devastated. And I thought, well, this is going to be the end of it. Maybe I'm not such a great advocate. But the very next day, I got another case, another trial, which I won. And the feeling of winning a trial, of somebody really their life being sort of given back to them, was something that I can't really describe. And that sort of stayed with me. I eventually went to another firm full-time. I was recruited, and that firm prosecuted privately for the RSPCA and for the Federation Against Copyright Theft. And when you prosecute privately, certainly in the magistrates' court, if a client is convicted, which is obviously what you hope, and they appeal, then under a solicitor's inherent rights of audience, which is still the case now, you can do the appeal hearings in the Crown Court. Every solicitor, whether you have higher rights or not, can appear in the Crown Court on a number of different topics. You can do bail applications, you can do appeals against sentence, you can do appeals against conviction, as long as you or somebody in your firm had dealt with the case. And so I was picking up a huge amount of work at Isleworth Crown Court, doing appeals to do with the RSPCA. And I, by that stage, had become a duty solicitor, and we covered Heathrow Airport. And we had a lot of drug smugglers who would come in, plead guilty in the magistrates' court, and then be sent up to the Crown Court. And so I was getting a lot of time in front of Crown Court judges. And at that stage, if you wanted higher rights of audience, you either had to make an application and do a portfolio and an exam, or you could avoid all of that by getting references from 12 Crown Court judges who said, actually, you know, you're a decent advocate. And that's the route I went. And so I qualified as a solicitor advocate. Now it must be, I think, 15 years ago. And really since then, that has been all I have done. I mean, I've still a duty solicitor. I still go to the police station. I still go to the magistrates' court. But primarily, I'm a trial advocate. And I'm quite lucky because the firm that I'm in now treats me effectively like in-house counsel. So they send me my briefs. I do my advices. but I get all the benefits of, first of all, great cases, because I'm not at the independent bar. So if the firm has a case that they want to keep in-house, it comes to me. And through that, I've done a number of very big cases that have made national news. And I've led now in a number of cases, both junior solicitor advocates and counsel. And as I say, I'm primarily a trial advocate, and it's something which I absolutely love. In terms of should you become a solicitor advocate or a barrister, I think that's a personal choice. There is, in some respects, I still think perhaps better training, advocacy training at the bar. I had to pick mine up along the way by way of experience, but I've got a lot of experience now, and I'm grateful to the people that helped me, and that's both more experienced solicitor advocates and also barristers, because certainly at the criminal bar you will find that there is a great amount of support. Why am I still a solicitor advocate? People often ask me, why haven't I transferred to the bar? And I've been offered places in chambers on a number of occasions, and the reason I haven't is because I don't see the point. I'm employed, and what does that mean? It means I get my paid holidays, it means I get my sick pay, I get my pension, I get my health benefits, and because of the position that I'm in now, I get to pick and choose the cases that I want to do, albeit I accept I'm more experienced. And there is nothing a barrister can do that a solicitor advocate can't do. I could become a QC if I wanted to, I could become a judge if I wanted to. And the only real difference between me and a barrister these days is that our gowns are very slightly different. When I started, you weren't allowed to wear wigs. We are now allowed to wear wigs, and for big trials I tend to wear them. For smaller court appearances, sometimes I don't, particularly if the air conditioning's gone in the court. I have the pleasure of being able to take my wig off, and barristers don't. Money in crime, as I'm sure you probably know, is not the best. If you go into law for the money, you will stay away from criminal law. Yes, you can earn a good living as a criminal advocate, as a criminal lawyer. I think solicitor advocates tend to be on salaries somewhere in the region of £50,000 to £60,000 if you're a general solicitor advocate. Certainly barristers, good junior barristers, can earn upwards of £100,000, but of course they've got to pay their chambers fees, they've got to pay their travel and everything else that goes with that. But if you go into the city, you'll earn tens of thousands more. You know, I saw an advert yesterday for a newly qualified city lawyer in an American firm where the starting salary was over £100,000. So if you're in it for the money, crime is not for you. But if you're in it for the excitement, if you're in it to help people, if you're in it really to be in those headline making, cases where you're dealing with real people, with real issues, whichever side of the fence you're on, then there's no better thing than crime. The only reason why I might or have ever considered becoming a barrister is because I do miss prosecuting. And as a independent barrister, you can do both. Whereas a solicitor advocate in in a firm, primarily, unless your firm privately prosecutes, you are a defence advocate. There is one set of solicitor advocate chambers in London. They're called parent buildings, and they both prosecute and defend. But again, they're self-employed, and that's not something that suits me, with a wife and a child and a mortgage and everything else that goes with it. So that's the reason why I decided to become a solicitor. That's why I became a solicitor advocate. And if you've got any questions, put them in the chat box below, or join me on LinkedIn and ask me questions there. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Carl. Andrew, do you want to go next? Because you have 3 different things to talk about, so I can imagine that'll be exciting.
Well, I quite enjoyed Carl's, to be honest. I was a trainee solicitor in 1998, which was, as one of my aspiring trainees said to me a couple of years ago, he said, "You're exactly double my age." And I said, "That's a funny way to resign before you start." So yes, very touchy about my age, but I did a little bit of crime when I first started. It was all very glamorous. I quite liked going along to court, Crown Court, with the barristers, who were inspiring, I'm going to be honest. What I didn't like about crime was 9 o'clock Saturday morning at Peterlee Magistrates Court, Peterlee Police Station, where I was in reception waiting for an ID parade in the middle of a beer can fight. So the glamour sort of wore off quickly with crime for me. I didn't quite enjoy that so much. But it was a learning curve, and you learn to speak to people in different situations and be able to explain legal theories to them or legal things to them in a manner in which they'd understand. And I learned that very quickly when I was doing family law. I wrote to somebody who was being abusive to their ex, and I was representing their ex. And I said, if you don't, I obviously put it in better terms than I'm going to put to you now, if you don't pack it in, I'm going to get a non-molestation order against you. And he came to my office and pinned me against a wall because he thought I'd called him a paedophile. And from then on, I used the word injunction, which was universally known, well, better than a non-molestation order for things such as that. Family law, I found to be very emotive. I fought over a black Labrador for somebody before. I happened to be enjoying my birthday in an adjacent town to come across my opponents, not my legal opponents, of course, and that was very uncomfortable, and I decided to leave. And it's one of the risks of what we do, whether you're a solicitor or barrister, that can come and track you down. I would say for solicitors, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, then perhaps a solicitor is more your thing, because you can streamline processes. For example, we have about 50 staff. The majority of them are conveyancers, although the majority of the money, to be fair, comes from childcare law at the moment. But the conveyancers, and we have people who have either given up on law or who are trying to become trainee solicitors who do that work, and they're very reasonably priced. We probably pay them, bear in mind we're Sunderland area, Durham area, so we're a lot cheaper than further south. We pay them about £15,000, whereas we pay our trainee solicitors £20,000. So if you systemize something and you have it sort of check boxes in place, then solicitors can make quite a bit of money from doing that. And we do the same with rent arrears claims. We had done the same with personal injury law. We don't particularly do that anymore. And we do the same with debt collection, whereas sort of it's low-hanging fruit is what I call it, because it's not big money, but if you systemize something, you can do it. For example, there's a solicitor close to me, one of my colleagues' wife is a director there, Wynn Solicitors, and it was quite widely publicised. Jeff Wynn, who was an entrepreneur as well as a solicitor, he started in crime and he made £10 million the other year. He's obviously not going to do that this year with the cuts, but if that interests you, if that excites you, then perhaps being a solicitor is for you. Similarly to Carl, I was sort of encouraged in 3 ways to be a doctor, which I was keen on until my GCSE chemistry and biology results came in. To be an accountant, which I was keen on. My mum worked at a bank, and until I did a week's work experience in an accountant's firm, and I got a real sense of achievement from doing my first set of accounts, and then was given another black bin liner full to sort out, and then another, and I thought, that's not for me. Some solicitors do like settling into a routine, and I hear what Carl said about conveyancers. Although I supervise conveyancing, I don't get into the nitty-gritty of the residential, and my case tend to be commercial. So I'll buy development sites, I deal with Section 106 agreements with local authorities, which is what I described, I think, to some students at Northumbria Uni on the land law course as a legal bribe to the council to allow you to build, because you're saying we'll give you so much towards facilities if you let us build these things, build our plans on this bit of land. And that I find is quite exciting. There's covenants. It can go wrong. I had a story from my old senior partner at my previous firm who said he cost the firm £10,000 when he drafted a lease because he'd missed out one word, and that word was not. I can't now remember the context of the word that he said, but that's a story which has stuck with me. And you know, proofreading when you're a solicitor and you're doing documents is really important. I did want to be a barrister when I first started and was doing my A-level law. We did mock trials and I was doing that. I quite enjoyed it. And the thing which swung me was there was an article, and I cut it out. It was in the Daily Mail, I think it was at the time, all those years ago. So it would have been sort of mid to late 90s. And it had the earnings of the professions. And it said what, you know, pupil barristers would earn, trainee solicitors would earn, and, you know, doctors and other people. And I looked along that, and I went for the stability. I wanted to know I was going to have a regular income. I didn't want to, when I was first starting out in my career, to be worried about how I was going to pay my bills, how I was going to survive. And that was sort of the driving force of why I went to be a solicitor. And I quite enjoy being a solicitor. One of the good things about it is you see the cases, and I've been talking to colleagues about this as well to draw on their experience before coming onto here. And you see the case all the way through, which sometimes is a blessing and sometimes not so. One of my colleagues said to me, and apologies to the barristers here, he does childcare law, and he said, if you're setting yourself up for a fall and the client is not taking the advice, and you know you're going to spend a morning in court and effectively get a good kicking from the judge and everybody else, send it out to junior counsel. He says, that's the plan. You don't have to see it. You'll then get it back and mop it up and close it down. But, you know, if you can do without the kicking, you don't have to do that. Sometimes barristers don't have that choice. If they're with the self-employed bar, it's a take it or leave it thing. They have the choice to take the case or leave the case, but they don't have the choice once they have the case to sidestep it, unless another booking comes in and they can do it. But I'm not quite sure how that works with them. So we do hold the hands of the clients. We can be more systemized, and I don't know, but we do have a good support network with colleagues and with secretarial support to make sure that we are just doing what we need to be doing. And, you know, I know some barristers have to type out their opinions. If I'm doing a long letter, I dictate it. I know the modern practice is solicitors type more. I do type more, but if there's something which is going to take me more than 3 or 4 minutes, I do have an attention span, like Carl mentioned. I don't know if it's a lawyery thing, but I do dictate it, and then it's off my desk and it's out of the way to do. What I would say to you, to be honest, when choosing, is don't pigeonhole yourself now. Get as much experience as you can. Go to different firms. Different firms have different environments. One might be a better fit for you than another. Shadow people and see how it goes. I always wanted to do crime, and I haven't. I'm quite logical. I'm quite OCD. If my email box gets too full, I want rid of it, and I want to get it down, and I'll then delegate and get things to make sure I'm in control and I don't miss anything. And yeah, I think that's roughly how I do it. So yeah, if you're organised and logical, then law is for you. I prefer the solicitor network just because of this better job security, although I'm now ironically self-employed. But yeah, I think to start off with, I would go for being a solicitor. That's probably me. Back to you, Gabby.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was really, really interesting. I would like now to invite our trainee solicitor, Siobhan, to talk about her career as well.
So yeah, I think people have already covered a lot of that has resonated with me that people have said, and Gerard has already covered sort of CPS specific points that I would also say are positives for working at the CPS. I mean, just briefly, as far as the training contract goes, although the requirements of the SRA have changed slightly now in terms of 4 seats and contentious and non-contentious, you are still encouraged to take secondment while you train with the CPS. I'm in the process of sorting mine out. I'm hoping to go to the coroner's court to do mine, and failing that I'll go to Birmingham City Council, purely because they do such a breadth of work, and the idea just being to experience something other than crime, because obviously that's all that we do. So I think it's been sort of covered in that respect, but in terms of how I made the choice, so when I was at school, I relate to Lydia a lot because I was told that I was a gobby mare at school, and I would say that's a fair assessment. And I wanted to be an actress. I had grand ideas about being in EastEnders and all these wonderful ideas in my head. But the reason I would often get myself into trouble, as Callum mentioned, would be if I saw something that I perceived to be unfair. So in one of these chats, academically at school I was fine, but it would just be when that sort of situation would arise, I wouldn't be able to help myself. So a teacher suggested, why don't you think about being a barrister? I did actually go to university at 18. I'm 36 now, and I dropped out after a year. I hated it, and I was like, whatever possessed me to do a law degree, that was awful. And then I kind of just floated about jobs, rubbish jobs, to be honest, that I didn't like for a few years. I had my eldest child, who's now 12. I don't know how that happened, but I thought to myself, I need to do something. I need to maybe give it another go, because the idea of being a lawyer is still sort of there in the back of my head. Did my law degree. I really liked my law degree. I know it tends to be a Marmite thing. People either do or they don't. Apart from EU law, I liked all of it. And then I had my son, and I had a bit of a gap. I finished my law degree in 2011, and at that time, the idea was to be a barrister, and I had the scholarship, had a partial scholarship from Lincoln's Inn. Similarly to Carl, I thought, where am I going to get the rest of the money from for this? I'm not really in a position where that's to hand. Got 2 children, so it's a bit risky. And that was when I started thinking, so going throughout the whole of my law degree, I'd mooted a lot. I mooted for the university team, absolutely loved it, and I hadn't ever considered going over to the other side, as it were. And that was the point that I started thinking, and I thought, well, do I want to be self-employed? No, I don't, not really. That's not really attractive to me. And then at that point, when I thought, as Carl says, about solicitor advocates and the work they do, that kind of sealed the deal for me, and it made the decision for me. So then, again, a bit of a gap. I didn't do my LPC to 2016 to 2018. Again, money. And then they brought the loan in. And when I started my LPC, I was very pregnant with my 3rd child. Everyone's staring at me when I turned up to get my books. And at the time, then I was working in the funeral industry. Absolutely adored that job. It was a fantastic job. People often think, oh, that's a bit strange. And actually what it is you're working with the living a lot more than you're working with the dead. That sounds really strange, but you are. You're dealing with families, and the transferable skills from that, I believe, have really helped me to this day. So then I worked for Shoesmiths, and I worked on the Grenfell Tower inquiry doing document review for 16 months. And I was really lucky to have that opportunity, and I recognise that. I actually applied for the CPS trainee scheme 3 times, and they didn't want me the first 2 times. I wasn't good enough to get past video interview. So the last time I thought, right, I can't have this again. I'm going to have to really work on this. And I really threw myself into practicing video interview, which is cringe as hell. I know it's awful, but to film yourself pretending to do a video interview and then watch it back. I got friends to do it. I got my husband to do it. I bugged everyone to watch these probably really boring to them interviews. And this time I got through. And I've been at the CPS since mid-March, got sent into lockdown 2 days into the training contract. But having said that, aside from not being able to attend court, which is really probably the only thing at the moment that I'm missing out on, the training's been, I can't fault it. It's been really structured. I've always had lots to do. There's been an amazing level of variety in what I'm doing. And I'm actually doing, and we do case study stuff as well, but I'm actually doing work on real cases and contributing. So I can't recommend it enough to anyone if you're interested in crime. For a long time, I dismissed prosecution work. I just thought about defence work. And I would just say to always keep that in mind as an option.
Amazing, thank you. So now we'll go on to the question and answer session. If anyone has any specific questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. But we're going to start with the questions that was emailed prior to the session. So I'll just ask the question, and if anyone on the panel feels like they've got an answer for it, just unmute yourselves. So the first question is, what was the best piece of advice you was given by someone else?
I have one for that, and it was given to me by, I used to go to Crown Court at university when I had gaps in the day, because I used to think it's either that or dossing about in the cafe, which is probably not good. And it's a barrister called Tom Kenning, and he's a lovely, lovely guy. Because most barristers, when you go to court, they are really lovely and they'll try and help you. What he said to me at the time was, routes to places aren't in straight lines. And at the time, I remember thinking, I get what he's saying, but at the same time, what is he saying to me? And now, when I look back, I know exactly what he means. And trust in the process. I used to get really het up about my age, because a lot of the other trainees are in their 20s. I'm not. I've got 3 kids. They don't. Trust in the process. Trust in all the work that you're putting in. If you're doing that background work and you're putting that graft in, you will get there. And try to remember Tom's words. And they make sense to me now. But at the time, I was like, that is not helpful, Tom. But it was. So yeah, that's the best piece I've ever been given.
Thank you for that. Has anyone else got anything?
Something. Oh,
go on, Callum.
After you.
Right. Okay. Shall I go? I'll be brief. I'll be very brief. Somebody said to me when I first started, whatever you do, say it with confidence, because you never know what the other person doesn't know. And if you just chink their armour very slightly by speaking with confidence and with enthusiasm about your topic and whatever you're doing, whether it be teaching or primarily in court or in commercial negotiations with people, then you're giving yourself an advantage, and you're just wobbling the other person to then hopefully win the case or win the argument for your guy, for your client, your person.
And echoing that, what Andrew's just said about confidence, in terms of networking, definitely make sure you network as much as you can. It's something I neglected to do in my first and second year of university, when I wish I'd made the most of that. Do things like this. I know it's weird with lockdown at the moment and having to do everything virtually, but eventually things will go back to normal, or a new version of normal at the very least. So keep networking with people, be cheeky. As Andrew says, be confident. Don't be afraid to ask. As I said, I know it's weird at the moment and everything's virtual, but if you want your CV looked at and you want to be a barrister, ask a pupil or ask a barrister. If you want to be a solicitor and you happen to want to go into the area of law that Andrew does, or you want to work at the CPS, say, ask Andrew or ask Siobhan or Gerard to look at your CV. I'm sorry if I've just made you all get inundated with CV checks, but I think asking people, asking the relevant practitioners in the areas that you want to go into for advice is absolutely crucial and will really help you to get through the journey in the easiest possible fashion. It is not easy, especially at the moment, and it is so competitive that asking the questions you want to have answered now will just make your life easier further down the line.
Well, I was given 2 bits of advice, and the first was to be nice. A lot of the work you do in the criminal courts, you are mixing with people of all different levels, And actually, certainly as a defence lawyer, you obviously and usually want something from the other side. If you go in with a sort of high and mighty attitude, particularly dealing with people who potentially are perceived to be lower than you on the rung, for example, court ushers, you're not going to get anywhere, and you pick up a reputation as being somebody who's not very nice, and nobody wants to help you. So when I go into court, particularly if it's a court that I haven't been to before, I'm always nice to the security people. I'm always nice to the ushers. I'm always nice to the court clerks, because they're the ones who are going to make your, life easy. And particularly if you're in a very busy court list and you're trying to get ahead of everybody else so you can move on to another court case somewhere. And I'm always nice to my opponent. I'm never horrible. And I find that I get the best out of people. And the other thing that I was told is be honest. That's whether you're working in a firm, whether you're dealing with an opponent. If you make a mistake, and let's be honest, everybody screws up from time to time, you've got to be honest and own it. If you say something to somebody, you say you're going to do something, then you do it, because people judge you by your word. And it's very, very easy in this profession, certainly in the criminal law, to get a reputation as somebody who is dishonest. And if that happens, you won't get on, and your life as a criminal advocate, particularly a trial advocate in the Crown Court, will be much, much harder. So those were the two bits of advice that I was told.
Thank you so much. That was some brilliant advice. We'll move on to our second question that we got, which is, what would you say is the greatest challenge you had to overcome, or the toughest aspect of your job? If anyone would like to tackle that one.
Well, I'll go again. For me, the hardest thing was putting my personal views aside. As you can imagine, as a defence advocate, I deal with horrible people who do horrible things. And although I have my own personal views, I'm not there to give my view. I'm there as an advocate, effectively as the mouthpiece of the client. I'm there to say the things that the client would say if they were able to, if they had the experience and the legal knowledge. And as much as I can sometimes hate what they do, and I deal with a lot of cases that deal with child abuse, with murder, with serious violence, I have to put that to one side, because that's my job. And there's no room in my job for morals in that respect. If you're going to be a criminal lawyer, you've got to expect to deal with various aspects of it. I'm quite lucky. My firm allows me not to do certain types of cases if I don't want. As a rule, I don't defend rape cases, and I don't defend child abuse cases, certainly not at trials. Occasionally I have to, because the clients request me, and I judge each case. But that's the hardest thing for me, putting my own feelings about a particular case to one side, and getting on and being professional.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share their views on this question?
I think the hardest thing for me was I came from, obviously, as I've said, a sort of a non-traditional, I don't like that term, but you know what I mean, a non-traditional background for what people expect from a lawyer. No one in my family's a lawyer. I didn't know any lawyers. So I literally remember being at university and thinking, I don't think I appreciated when I first started university the second time, sort of what you need to do and what you need to be aware of before you start this journey, and especially if you want to be a barrister, I think, and just what it entails. And I think for me, that was the hardest bit. There's a programme called How to Break Into the Elite on BBC. It's on iPlayer now, and that explains it better than I can. But yeah, for me, that was really difficult. And there was times when I thought, am I ever going to be able to do this, because I don't have the money, or I'm never going to get offered a training contract. I've probably had 100 no's when I've applied for training contracts, and I don't mind saying that. And so I just think, I look back now, and if I could tell myself back then, I'd say the same things, to trust in the process, to keep working, and one day it will happen.
Thank you so much for that. We'll go on to the next question then. So this is, why did you choose the firm or chambers that you are currently working for? If anyone wants to jump on that.
I can take this one if you'd like, Gabby. Having recently come through the process, I got my pupillage in May of last year, and I started in April, literally in lockdown, which was quite a strange one. In terms of choosing chambers, I applied for quite a few different chambers. I had around 20 interviews. So going back to what Siobhan said in answer to the last question, definitely be prepared for it to be a long ride. You may get it first time, and that's excellent, but it's not very common at all. Most people take quite a while to get it, and a lot of interviews, and you have to be ready for that. In terms of the reasons why I picked the chambers I'm at now, I tended to go for applications to smaller sets. I didn't particularly personally want to be at a big, perhaps more corporate facing set. So you might want to think about what kind of chambers you want to be at, or indeed what kind of firm you want to be at, whether you want to be at a big set or a small one. For me, I felt a small set would perhaps provide a more familial atmosphere, and that as a pupil, I would be one of only a few, and therefore I'd be known by my name rather than perhaps just a number. So that was a big thing for me. I also looked at the areas of law. I already knew that crime and family was what I wanted to do. And so I tailored my pupillage applications to small sets who predominantly did mainly crime and family work. And then thirdly as well was location. I applied mainly around Liverpool and the Northern Circuit, a couple of sets in Leeds that I particularly liked, and one or two sets in London as well. Not that I had any desire to go to London, putting it bluntly, but I think you do have to take a broad brush approach given the nature of how competitive getting pupillage is, and try and get as many interviews as you possibly can in order to attain that coveted pupillage offer, really.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, and I would like to invite a solicitor and a barrister to address this. What are the opportunities to advance your career?
Well, I can only talk about criminal solicitors, but as I said, there is nothing that a solicitor can't do that a barrister does. Certainly as a solicitor, you can progress to being a partner in a firm. You can start your own firm up. Once you're, I think, 3 years qualified now, you can start your own firm. And once you start your own firm, you can have people working for you. You can go in the direction you want. I know that there are some people who start their firms and they have a very holistic view to doing that. It's less corporate. And of course, they run their firms sometimes from home. And when you do have your own firm, you have a lot more freedom. Solicitors can, as I say, apply to become judges, district judges, Crown Court judges if you've got higher rights. Certainly, solicitor advocates can become QCs, and so in that respect, there is a huge amount that you can do. You can work abroad. There are obviously a lot of larger firms that have international offices, so if that's the sort of thing that you're interested in and you can get into a city firm, then that is the way, that's one aspect that you can move on to. And of course, as a solicitor, you can work in lots of different fields, as people have said. In-house, you can work at local authority. You can become a private prosecutor, work for a regulator. So that there's a lot of progression as a solicitor. The world really is your oyster. You're not just limited to advocacy.
Could I say that specifically for the CPS, if you were considering a career there as an employed barrister, within the Crown Advocate grade, there are different types of Crown Advocates depending on your level of experience and the types of cases that you want to do. I am a Crown Advocate. You can go up to become a senior Crown Advocate or even a principal Crown Advocate. And the systems of grading those type of advocates is very similar to the levels of experience that you would find with the independent bar. For example, a level 2 counsel up to a level 4 counsel doing the most serious types of cases. So there is a degree of career progression even within that Crown Advocate grade as well.
Amazing, thank you. So we'll move on to the next question, which is quite a topical question. So how is your work-life balance, and does this differ between solicitors and barristers? Andrew, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I can do. I don't have a work-life balance. But that's a reason, and I decided on that a couple of years ago, and now I'm going to have one again. And what I decided a couple of years ago is, somebody told me, because I said, oh, I quite fancy applying to be a deputy district judge, is what I said to them. They said, you'll never be able to do that. You're just a solicitor. And I went, all right, you don't even do that much court work, so you're never going to be able to do that. And that was my motivation. And what I did was I had a look at the application process. I went to teach part-time at Northumbria University, which I really enjoy. This is going to be my last term. I'm not going to do it again. But I've had 3 years there, and that took extra time. It took weekends. I did my master's degree at the same time, as well as being in full-time practice. And by full-time practice, I have targets to meet, I have staff to manage, I have queries to answer, not just from my clients, from my staff. So work-life balance was difficult, but I got a goal. I did it for a reason. Now it's much better. The trainees who are in my department are well on, and I don't have to work as much. But if you think you can advance in law by doing 9 till 5 and achieve your goals by not being prepared to give the extra mile, what I would say to you is, if you go to a firm for work experience or you get a training contract, be there before some of the big decision makers are there. Even if you're there 5 to 9 and they get in at 9 o'clock, which is doubtful, but I'm there at 7:30, get in at 7:25, and then if I'm leaving at 6:15, leave at 6:20. It doesn't matter. I don't know what time you left, but it just makes you look committed. And I'm not saying do that every day, but just don't get the reputation for the person who's at your desk for 9 o'clock and gone by 5, because people will think you're not committed, and that can stifle your advancement through a firm.
Thank you for that. I definitely agree. I email Andrew 24/7 while I was doing my course, so I completely understand that. Has anyone else got any questions or any answers to their work-life balance?
Could I just add to the work-life balance? So when I worked at Shoesmiths, what I was told very clearly there was that to do that, but don't do it and sort of sit there and sort of tapping away, and actually you're not doing very much. So if you're not adding value when you're spending that time there, that'll be noticed as well. Generally speaking, and this applies to Shoesmiths and the CPS, my work-life balance is very good. It's great now. We have flexi time at the CPS, so if I had to go a little bit early the other day, so I can just make the time up another day. And you accumulate flexi hours, but I won't go into that. But with Shoesmiths, even though it's a national firm and it's more commercial, I think my worry before I started there was, oh God, I want to be there all hours. And don't get me wrong, there are certain teams within Shoesmiths that happens to more often, such as insolvency. So if one of their clients is having a meltdown financially, they can be there literally overnight. In terms of my job, most times 9:30, 6:30 would be an average day for me, with the odd occasion where I'd have to stay till 10 or 11 p.m. at night because there was something urgent that needed to be done. But like's already been said, you have to expect that's going to happen sometimes. You can't always expect to nip off home at 5 o'clock. Law doesn't work like that.
Thank you. Our next question is from Veronica, and she asks, what would you have done differently if you could during your law journey so far?
I can jump on this one. So I think for me, and this is perhaps a very personal thing, but I came pretty much straight through. I stumbled into university at 18. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship from Middle Temple and went straight onto the bar course at 21. And then I was fortunate enough to be offered a pupillage upon pretty much finishing the bar course and then starting 9 months later. So aside from a 9-month break, I've pretty much gone the whole way through the system one by one, if you like. I think if I'd had my time again, and obviously hindsight is a wonderful thing, I would probably have taken the time to do something a little bit different. And build some experience and get that life experience, as I call it, that I possibly don't have at the young age of 23. I think especially doing criminal law, one of the worries that I do have when I start Second Six and going on is that there are going to be times when a defendant takes one look at me and goes, nah, mate, you're not representing me. You're young enough to be my kid or my grandson. And that's going to be a situation that I have to deal with without perhaps the experience, life experience that I may have gained throughout a couple of years of doing something different, much like a lot of the rest of the panel have done with their lives. Equally, it may well be that you are so focused on a career in law that you're so desperate that you just want to get through it and get cracking. And if that's the case and you're fortunate enough to do so, then very well done to you. But if I'd have had my time again, that would definitely be something I'd have done different.
That's lovely. Thank you, Callum.
Sorry, Carl, do you want to? Oh no. Something I would have done different is I wouldn't have jumped into being a partner as quickly, because I became a partner while I was in my sort of mid to late 20s, probably about 25, and that was because I just thought, I saw the goal. You know, I was in a law firm. I needed to be a partner. That was the top of the tree, and I went for it. And I wish I hadn't. You get an awful lot of responsibility, things which you don't know about. I didn't understand business. I didn't understand a lot of the solicitors' accounts compliance issues on a bigger scale than just the professional skills course. And I would say take your time to earn your spurs through your career. Don't rush to get towards that end goal, because you'll make yourself, you'll be a better partner for it. You'll be a better barrister for it if you just take your time, take a breath, and don't rush to the end goal. And that's what I would do different.
Thank you, Andrew.
I think for me, a little bit like Callum, I went straight from university into my solicitors finals, into a training contract. Lots of my friends were taking years out, and I didn't, because I was rushing in. And although I don't regret it, because obviously I wanted to be a solicitor, the more that I have, the longer that I've practiced, I've realised it's much harder to take long periods of time off. Once you're in the cycle of earning, of paying bills, etc., having a family, it's much harder. You are a long time a lawyer. And therefore, I think I probably would have taken a year off and done something, even if it wasn't law related. I might have travelled more, I might have worked abroad, I might have explored those other opportunities before I fell into a career. And so now when people ask me, should I go straight from university, should I jump into law, I say, if you have the choice, if you can afford it, it's worthwhile doing that, taking time out for yourself, because once you're in this, it's almost impossible to do it again.
Great, thank you, Carl.
Thank you all for that. I've got a question in the chat for Siobhan saying, have you faced any discrimination for being a woman, and what is the ratio of men to women within the CPS?
The ratio in the CPS, I'd have to get back to you to get an exact figure. Off the top of my head, from what I've seen with my own eyes, I'd say it's pretty uneven spread, but I'd have to have a look, and I will do. In terms of discrimination for being a woman, yeah, I have. So you might get snarky little remarks of people, or people might assume. So I noticed somebody shared on Twitter that he'd been a lead counsel in, and he's broken it down. I have to try and find it. He's broken it down into different types of cases. And on the cases that involve violence or gangs, he said that most often you'll find there's no women. And then he said, and in the sex cases, you're actually inundated with female counsel. And I mentioned that because I read it with some interest, because I mean, I've had a comment off I did a little brief stint in criminal defence, and I've had a client saying, oh, do you want to be a lawyer? And I just sort of looked, I didn't even respond, I just looked at him like, okay, what was that? And the male solicitor actually said, don't patronise her, like she's got the same degree I have, which I was very grateful for. But I just thought, what do you want me to say to that? I just sort of pulled face at him. And then you get sometimes, this doesn't happen a lot. When I worked at Shoesmiths, a lot of the male partners there are fantastic allies in terms of this subject, and there are amazing female partners there that are just completely awe-inspiring. But you might get someone who makes comments about, oh, you know, what you're wearing, oh, you're wearing all black, or you're going to a funeral today. And, you know, you just sort of think to yourself, well, I'm not quite sure what that remark's all about, really. So, I mean, you can either, it doesn't bother me too much, but that person, I knew him I know him. So I thought he's only trying to get a reaction. So I just sort of made a joke back to him. But you will get it. And I think you can't let it sort of knock you down and affect you. There's ways of pulling someone up on it that can be quite subtle. And I'm sure that you can be creative in the way you do that without, but you don't have to be, I mean, not that you should be polite necessarily to a man that makes you uncomfortable, but at work, there's ways of politely doing it. Or I just let it fly over my head a lot of the time, because I just think to myself, it doesn't even make sense to me. I don't know why you're saying that. But in terms of obtaining roles and getting jobs, no, I don't think that I have been discriminated against. It's just little comments that you get here and there from people. Or sometimes people talk to you like you're a silly little dolly that hasn't got a brain. But I don't really take much notice of that.
Thank you so much. We've got 2 more questions in the chat. And the first one is, would you suggest to gain some experience before starting to study law at university and take a gap year? Or would you do it while studying?
I think I would have taken my gap year if I'd had my time again in between my undergrad and the bar course, or perhaps after the bar course and before starting pupillage. I realised I had 9 months off, and I took advantage of that and went travelling as best I could. But I think it would have been better placed perhaps before the bar course had started, on the basis that once you've got your degree, you've got a bit of that world knowledge, if you like, there's then that opportunity with your relevant qualifications to perhaps do something a bit different, or maybe even just work in terms of legal experience. I spent a lot of time on the bar course with a lot of friends who had taken a year or 2 out. In fact, a couple had even come in at sort of 35, 40 after a career in something completely different after 10 or 15 years. And they had a lot of relevant experience and life experiences, unfortunately, I have to keep banging on about, that I definitely didn't have. And I think that would have really benefited me, both on the bar course in terms of legal experience for the academic side of things, but also in terms of the practical elements on the bar course, the advocacy, if you like, and the knowledge of what court is really like, etc., before getting cracking, whereas I had none of that experience. And I think that was definitely to my detriment.
Thank you for that. I'm not going to keep you much longer. We've got 2 more questions. Feel free to leave if you need to, but I appreciate whoever can stay. So the second to final one is, how has a life as a barrister or solicitor changed during the pandemic, and what challenges have you both faced?
Go on, Gerard.
I answered this one privately for Sukhbir, but I think the key thing is the lack of physically being in court. Since the beginning of the lockdown on the 23rd of March, I haven't set foot in a courtroom yet. Some people doubtless will have, but the big difference was getting used to the technology, doing Crown Court hearings via Skype for Business, and in some cases it was the BT Meet Me telephone system, which was a bit of a disaster, to be honest. And also the lack of trials, the absence of trials, which, as you'll all be aware, is being very much debated in the media at the moment, and the government are looking at measures to try to reintroduce those. So that's it's stepping into the virtual world that has been the biggest change since this lockdown.
Well, for me, I've still been going to the police station. I've still been going in person to the magistrates' court. I agree with Gerard. There's been a massive sea change in the use of technology for the better, I think, in some respects. It means that rather than driving an hour or 2 hours for a hearing that might last 5 minutes, I can do that from the comfort of my dining room in my shorts, although nobody can see that I'm wearing my shorts. And that's been fantastic. The benefits of being a solicitor have been that, albeit a number of solicitors were furloughed, I wasn't, and so I have continued to be paid throughout. I know the bar have been devastated because they haven't had that income, and so that's one aspect of being self-employed that I'm grateful that I'm an in-house solicitor advocate. But certainly the technology and the getting used to working from home remotely as much as we have been. But I think that's, in some respects, it's been good. But I'm looking forward to getting back to trials. I start my first trial, Crown Court trial, on Monday. So hopefully that'll herald back to normality.
I was just going to say absolutely the same, other than the trials, obviously, but it's getting everybody in the office, has been working from home, to be fair, other than a few of us have been going in because, as one of the directors, it doesn't matter if I die, by all accounts. So, going in, scanning posts to people have been making use of the technology and just getting used to it and actually using the system better. And people are finding that it is easy to email people rather than rely on Royal Mail and the DX. So it's actually made us more efficient. And we're getting things done and caught up in the lull that perhaps we wouldn't have done so. So I think it's strengthened our firm by just making us more efficient and more on top of our caseloads and ready. And thankfully, because we do a lot of legal aid with care work, that hasn't really let up. People are still not looking after their children properly. They were not following COVID guidelines at all. So that's been, a constant stream of work, which has kept us all busy. Well, not me busy, but my colleagues.
Thank you so much. Callum, do you want to have a go as well?
I was just going to mention in terms of pupillage, it's been very strange, and I'm sure Siobhan will agree with her starting her training contract 2 days before lockdown. I saw my first trial, the first trial to take place in Liverpool Crown Court since lockdown began, the last 2 days. And it felt good to be actually in a court. I've only been in, that was my 5th time in the last 3 months. But I do echo what Carl was saying about, I think, and Andrew as well, in terms of strengthening lawyers' use of technology, especially with regard to things like mentions and PTPHs in crime that won't take very long at all. And like Carl says, rather than having to drive an hour and a half to, say, Nottingham for a 5-minute mention. You can now do it from the comfort of your own home. And funnily enough, I do exactly the same thing. Shorts on the bottom and just make sure I don't stand up. So it has been weird, but I think starting that and getting used to what will become the new normal for me, I think will lend its hand to being a strength in due course. And I'm sure Siobhan would agree with me on that as well.
100%, I agree. I think it's been a serious learning curve. I was supposed to go to court on the 3rd day. The next thing I know was go home and don't come back until you're told it's safe. Very strange. But I suppose neither of us will ever forget our pupillage training contracts and how they began. So yeah, it's got its advantages for me, because I don't have to wrestle with a child in the morning who takes 45 minutes to put a sock on. So it's, in some ways, it's been good for me, but in other ways, I do miss court and things like that.
Thank you so much. And our last question is for you as well, Siobhan, but I'd like to invite other panelists to address it as well. You stressed that one of the challenges faced was coming from a non-lawyer's background. Now, despite that, what ways did you find to respond to that challenge?
So I think with me, I think you have to accept from the outset, when you think, so say if you think I want to be a barrister, I think being very clear about what you need to do, being very clear about what you're up against. I think you have to be really honest if you want to go to the bar about what it's going to take and what you have to do. And I mean for both, but I think especially for the bar, a lot of people get stumped by all the different requirements and stuff, and they think, oh, what's this stuff with an in? And yeah, I think you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be prepared to spend time when other friends of yours might be out having fun. You might have to sacrifice. So I had children, so I had to sacrifice my evenings. So every single night during the LPC and during the LLB, you'd find me with my head in a book for hours on end. And I was exhausted. And then I'd get up in the morning, take the kids to school, go to work, pick them up, get them sorted for the evening, and do the same again. But you have to accept that that's only for a temporary period of time. And in the end, it's theoretically should be worth it. So yeah, I think accepting that you have to make sacrifices and being realistic and honest and having that knowledge about what it's going to take and what you have to do.
I, like Siobhan, didn't come from a traditional background in any way. I was state school educated, no parents or family members who were lawyers, no connections whatsoever. I think for me and the things that I did to respond to that and perhaps make it even with my peers who did have those advantages was something that Andrew mentioned earlier, and something that I can't stress enough, and that's being confident and being ballsy. It does make it harder, perhaps not having mum or dad who's already a barrister or a solicitor, but it is in no way a detriment to you if you rectify or alleviate that by having the confidence to network and make your own connections. If anything, I think that stands you in better stead than riding on the coattails of your parents, perhaps. I think making sure that you always ask the questions that you want answered is crucial, no matter how stupid you may think you sound. And believe me, even getting into pupillage, you will continue to ask hundreds, if not thousands, of stupid questions. I've learnt now just to not be judged, really, or expect not to be judged. As Carl said earlier, the criminal bar and indeed the family bar are exceptionally welcoming and friendly. They will not judge you for asking questions that you need answered. They just take it on the basis that as a pupil, you don't have much, if any, experience, and therefore you need to ask these questions now so that before you stand up in court on second six, you don't make a fool out of yourself, putting it bluntly. So I think having confidence and not being afraid to ask the questions that you want answered is probably the things that I did in order to make it even with perhaps my friends who could ask mum and dad, who was already a legal practitioner.
Thank you for that. And again, thank you to all the panellists and the people that have joined us this evening. It has been a great session, and I'm sorry for running over, and again, about the technical difficulties. I would love to do like a little virtual clap. I know not many people are showing the cameras, but it's my favourite thing to do afterwards. So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
So again, our session, or our next part 2 session, is next Wednesday on the 8th of July, so I hope you can all join. I will share our panel's LinkedIn on my LinkedIn for anyone that wants to connect with them. And Amalia, if you have anything to add?
Yeah, please join us for our next session as well, and thank you for coming, and thank you to the panel for taking their time to join us tonight.
Amazing. Thank you all.
Thank you, and good luck to everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.